If someone told me 2 years ago how my life would implode, I would have laughed. I was a stable man with a paid off house and a seemingly happy marriage. But looking back, I can summarize the destruction of my world in one breath. My wife cheated in our shower. I snapped and hit the guy. Now my son testifies I am the monster. Then karma delivered the perfect ending. It started on a Wednesday. The kind of day that feels deceptively normal until it isn't. I left Indianapolis early, thinking I was being romantic. I pulled into the driveway just after 2. The white roses in the passenger seat were for Rachel, a surprise to celebrate 18 years of building a life together. But as I killed the engine, my eyes snagged on something wrong. A silver Honda Accord sat parked near the garage, blocking my path. It wasn't a neighbor's car, and it wasn't one of her friends. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, fighting a cold knot forming in my stomach. I unlocked the front door quietly, hoping to catch her in the kitchen. The house was silent, but the air felt heavy, charged with a strange electricity. I placed the roses on the entryway table and listened. Above the hum of the refrigerator, a sound drifted down from the second floor. Water running. Then, laughter. It was Rachel's laugh, but light and giddy in a way I hadn't heard in a decade. A man's voice joined hers, shattering the illusion of my safety. My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me up the stairs toward the master bedroom. Every step felt heavier than the last, like wading through concrete. The bathroom door stood cracked open 6 inches, steam curling into the hallway. Through the frosted glass, 2 distinct silhouettes moved against each other. There was no room for interpretation. My wife and a stranger were naked in the home my grandmother built, washing away our vows with my soap. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was territorial. I threw the shower door open, the glass banging violently against the tile wall. Rachel screamed, clutching a washcloth, while the man froze like a deer in headlights. He was younger, fit, with dark hair slicked back by the water. Instead of panicking, he raised his hands in a calm, condescending gesture, as if telling me to relax in my own bathroom. That calm expression broke something vital inside me. The rational project manager vanished, replaced instantly by pure, white, hot aggression. I didn't think. I lunged. I grabbed him by the shoulders and slammed him against the wet tiles. The impact echoed like a gunshot. He tried to shove past me, so I swung, my fist connecting hard with his jaw. Blood sprayed onto the pristine white grout, bright red against the steam. Rachel wasn't apologizing or crying for mercy. She was screaming at me, calling me a psychopath. I stood over him, breathing hard, unaware that the sirens wailing in the distance were coming to take me away, not him. The sirens grew louder until red and blue lights swept the ceiling. Uniformed officers stormed upstairs, separating us before I could explain a single thing. Brandon fled, leaving blood on the carpet like breadcrumbs. Rachel stood wrapped in a towel, sobbing to a female officer, painting herself as the terrified survivor. I sat on the bed, hands trembling from the adrenaline crash. They didn't arrest me that night, but the cold calculation in Rachel's eyes promised a war was coming. An uneasy silence filled the house for 2 days. I slept in the guest room, convincing myself the worst was over. I assumed Brandon would disappear into shame, and Rachel would realize what she had done. I went to work on Friday morning, throwing myself into a critical project, meeting with major clients. I wore my best suit, standing at the head of the conference table, completely unaware that my wife had been busy finalizing her next move. The conference room door opened, interrupting my presentation. Two uniformed officers stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. My boss, Jim, stood up in confusion, but the officers marched straight to the podium. They asked me to turn around and place my hands behind my back. The mechanical click of handcuffs echoed in the silent room. I was marched out past horrified clients and whispering colleagues, stripped of my dignity in seconds. Brandon had pressed charges. I spent Friday night in a holding cell smelling of bleach and stale sweat. My lawyer explained the charge was third-degree assault, a misdemeanor carrying potential jail time. The humiliation of the booking process, fingerprints, mugshot, the cold search, broke my spirit. I sat on a steel bench, staring at the concrete floor, realizing I was now part of a system I had always trusted. Saturday morning, I paid $2,500 cash for bail and walked into the blinding sunlight. All I wanted was a shower and clean clothes. I drove straight to the house, the one my grandmother bought in the 60s. I jammed my key into the front door lock, but it wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it, thinking the mechanism was stuck. Then I noticed the shine of the metal. The hardware was brand new. Panic flared in my chest. I pounded on the door, shouting for Rachel, but the house remained silent as a tomb. A movement across the street caught my eye. A police cruiser sat idling, the officer watching me intently. My phone buzzed. It was Tom. His voice grave. He told me Rachel had obtained a temporary emergency restraining order. She claimed a history of abuse, citing the incident with Brandon as proof of my violent nature. I was legally barred from coming within 100 yards of my own property. If I didn't leave immediately, I would be arrested again. I retreated to a budget motel on the outskirts of town, the only place with a vacancy. I sat on the lumpy mattress, surrounded by beige walls, with nothing but the suitcase from Indianapolis. I checked my bank app and felt the blood drain from my face. The joint savings account was empty. Rachel had transferred everything. I was homeless, criminalized, and broke, while the woman who cheated on me sat comfortably in my living room, watching my television. The motel room smelled of industrial cleaner and despair, a sharp contrast to the home I wasn't allowed to enter. I paced the narrow space between the bed and the window, clutching my phone like a lifeline. It was Saturday afternoon. Tyler was driving back from State College, a trip I usually paid for. He was the one variable Rachel couldn't control, or so I thought. I imagined him walking into that house, seeing the new locks, and demanding answers. I waited for his call. Hours bled into evening shadows, turning the parking lot outside into a landscape of gray. My phone remained silent, a black mirror mocking my isolation. I finally checked the family tracking app, a habit born of parental worry. His dot was stationary. He wasn't at a friend's house or a coffee shop. He was at my address. He had driven past the police cruiser, unlocked the door, and walked straight into the enemy camp. A cold realization settled in my gut. He hadn't called. Desperation is a bitter flavor, metallic and sharp on the tongue. I typed out a text, my thumbs heavy and clumsy on the glass screen. Ty, I am staying at the Motel 6 off the highway. We need to talk. There are things you don't know. I stared at the delivered status, watching it turn to read almost instantly. The 3 distinct dots of a typing indicator appeared, then vanished. They appeared again, pulsing rhythmically. He was writing, erasing, and rewriting. My heart hammered. The response arrived with a cheerful ping that belied the venom on the screen. Mom showed me the police report. I can't believe you'd attack an innocent person like an animal. I stared at the words, unable to reconcile them with the boy I taught to ride a bike. Innocent person. Brandon was naked in my shower. Animal. I was the one living in a cage. The text continued. I am ashamed to call you my dad right now. Do not come near us. I read the message again, dissecting the syntax. It didn't sound like a 19-year-old business major. Systematic control, emotional volatility, and unsafe environment. These were clinical terms. Buzzwords weaponized by a lawyer or a manipulator. Rachel had gotten to him first. She had poured poison into his ear before I could even say hello. She wasn't just hiding behind a restraining order. She was using our son as a human shield. The betrayal cut deeper than the affair ever could. Anger replaced the shock, hot and sudden. I opened my banking app again, navigating to the pending transactions. A tuition payment of $12,000 was scheduled to clear on Monday. I was paying for his dorm, his meal plan, and the gas in his tank. I was financing the very lifestyle that allowed him to sit in my living room and judge me. I was the monster. Yet my wallet was the only thing keeping his world spinning. The irony tasted like ash. I was about to type a furious rebuttal when a second message popped up. I am glad I am here to protect her from you. Get help for your anger issues. He wasn't just angry, he felt righteous. He believed he was the hero of this twisted story, saving his fragile mother from the tyrant. I set the phone down on the scared nightstand. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bridge burning down to the water. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a sterile scent that did nothing to mask the tension. I sat next to Tom, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. Across the aisle, Rachel refused to look at me, staring at the table like a tragic widow. Then, the bailiff called the first witness. My heart stopped as Tyler walked to the stand. He wore a suit I had bought him for his high school graduation. He avoided my gaze completely. Tyler's voice was shaky at first, but it gained strength as he recited the script. He told the judge I was controlling, that I monitored everything, and that the house was a prison of fear. He used words like gaslighting and tyrant, painting 18 years of fatherhood as a reign of terror. It was surreal listening to my own son rewrite history. He claimed he was relieved to leave for college, just to escape me. Every word felt like a physical blow. Tom stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. He didn't yell or posture, he just asked simple, quiet questions. He asked Tyler to name a single date where I hit him. Tyler stammered, looking at his mother for help. Tom asked for a specific instance of physical violence against Rachel. Tyler shifted in his seat, sweating under the fluorescent lights. Abuse isn't always physical, he finally muttered. He had no dates, no bruises, and no police reports. The narrative began to crack. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, leaned forward. She looked from Tyler to me, then back to the boy. "Young man," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I need facts, not feelings. Did your father ever threaten your mother's life in your presence?" Tyler hesitated, the silence stretching until it was painful. "No," he whispered, but I felt the tension. The judge leaned back, her expression unreadable but clearly unimpressed. The momentum shifted. Tom pulled a stack of documents from his briefcase, the paper rustling loudly in the quiet room. "Your Honor, we submit Exhibit B." He handed copies to the bailiff. "These are credit card statements from the past 8 months. Rachel stiffened, her posture finally breaking. Tom read the numbers aloud. $7,000 spent on luxury hotels in Chicago and Milwaukee. Steak dinners for 2. Men's clothing from boutiques I had never entered. The courtroom air turned electric with the revelation. Tom didn't stop there. He held up a phone record log that looked like a dictionary. "Hundreds of calls to Mr. Brandon Miller during these trips," he said calmly. Mrs. Miller wasn't afraid of her husband. She was afraid of getting caught, spending their retirement savings on a lover. Rachel's lawyer jumped up to object, shouting about relevance, but the damage was done. The judge was flipping through the receipts, her brow furrowed. The timeline of the affair matched the withdrawals perfectly. The judge silenced the objection with a sharp wave of her hand. She looked directly at Rachel, her eyes cold and dissecting. "The court finds no credible evidence of a threat to safety," she ruled. "This protective order is dismissed immediately." She slammed the gavel down, the sound ringing like a church bell. Rachel slumped in her chair, burying her face in her hands. I stood up, a free man again, but as I looked at my son, I felt no victory. The restraining order was gone, but the legal war had just begun. Rachel filed for divorce the next morning, her signature aggressive and sprawling on the papers. She didn't just want a separation, she wanted to burn my life to the ground. Her petition demanded permanent spousal support, 50% of my retirement, and, most audaciously, half the value of my grandmother's house. She claimed her emotional labor entitled her to the equity. It was a greedy grab for a lifestyle she had already forfeited. We sat in a smaller, quieter hearing room for the settlement conference. My lawyer, Tom, laid the original 1967 deed on the table like a royal flush. The house was inherited property, never commingled, and the mortgage was paid solely from my pre-marital funds. Rachel's lawyer argued that her improvements added value, citing the new kitchen and roof. Tom countered with receipts showing every nail and shingle was paid for by my salary, not joint funds. The foundation of her argument crumbled instantly. The judge, a man who seemed tired of theatrics, peered over his glasses at the evidence. He ruled that the house remained my sole property, untouched by the dissolution of the marriage. He awarded Rachel exactly $12,000 for her contributions. to the household aesthetic over 18 years. It was a pittance compared to the hundreds of thousands she expected. The color drained from her face as she realized she had no home, no equity, and no leverage. The house was safe. Next came the battle for spousal support. Rachel's lawyer painted a portrait of a helpless woman who sacrificed her career for her family. They claimed she was destitute, unable to survive in the modern job market after quitting her dental office job 3 years ago. Rachel sniffled on cue, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. She wanted $3,000 a month to maintain the marital standard of living. It was a performance worthy of an award. But we had the ultimate counter argument ready. Tom didn't argue about her employability. Instead, he brought up the dissipation of marital assets. He pointed to the $7,000 she blew on hotels and steak dinners with Brandon. In our state, using community funds to conduct an affair is a serious breach of fiduciary duty. The judge looked at the spreadsheet of luxury, resort charges, and frowned. You cannot claim poverty while financing a 5-star vacation for your lover. Her spending habits became the noose that strangled her alimony claim. The judge actually chuckled, a dry sound that silenced the room. "Mrs. Miller," he said, looking at the Hilton receipts, "someone who can spend $1,500 on a weekend getaway clearly understands financial management." He denied the request for spousal support entirely. He stated that her business degree and previous work history made her perfectly capable of supporting herself. She was leaving the marriage with her personal car, her clothes, and $25,000 from the savings. That was it. The gravy train had derailed. Rachel dissolved into hysterics, screaming that it wasn't fair as the bailiff moved closer. She had gambled everything on me rolling over, and she had lost spectacularly. She looked at me with pure venom, expecting me to fix it. But I just packed my briefcase. I walked out to the parking lot, the settlement papers heavy in my hand. The legal battle was over, and I had won. But across the asphalt, Tyler was waiting by my car, and he didn't look like he was done fighting. I approached him, steeling myself for the confrontation. Tyler was leaning against the passenger door, his arms crossed over his chest like a shield. He didn't look like my son in that moment. He looked like a stranger fueled by misplaced, righteous indignation. He pushed off the car as I got close, his face twisted in a snarl. "You happy now?" he shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "You just left Mom with nothing. She has nowhere to go because of you." He was echoing her victimhood perfectly. I unlocked the car door, refusing to engage with his temper tantrum. "Your mother made her choices, Tyler. She spent 8 months and thousands of dollars making them." He stepped in front of me, blocking the door, physically forcing the confrontation. "A real man takes care of his family." He spat, repeating a line I had definitely heard Rachel use before. "You left her on the street." I looked him dead in the eye, seeing the absolute conviction in his gaze. He genuinely believed I was the villain here. That ignorance required a sharp correction. A real son doesn't lie under oath to destroy his father, I said, my voice dangerously low. The color drained from his face as the reality of my tone hit him. "You chose your side in that courtroom, Tyler. You stood up, and called me a monster to help her steal my house. I opened the car door, using it to push him back a step. If you want to support her so badly, do it with your own money. I am done paying for people who actively try to ruin me. Tyler blinked, the bravado evaporating instantly. Wait, what about school? You usually pay the tuition. I shook my head, watching the dawn of comprehension on his face. I canceled the check this morning. You are an adult, Tyler. You can take out loans or get a job. Rachel came running across the parking lot then, heels clicking frantically on the asphalt. She had heard the last part. You can't do that, she shrieked, grabbing Tyler's arm. He's your son. You can't punish him for telling his truth. Her entitlement was suffocating. He didn't tell the truth, I said, staring at them both over the roof of my car. He lied to a judge to help you commit fraud. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine, the rumble of the motor drowning out her screaming. Tyler looked between me and his mother, looking like a lost child rather than the man who had just condemned me. I put the car in reverse and backed out. They wanted to be a team. Now they could survive as one, alone in the parking lot. Returning to the empty house was strange. It felt huge and echoing. But for the first time in months, it felt safe. I spent the weekend changing every single lock on the doors, upgrading to heavy deadbolts that cost a fortune. I packed Rachel's remaining things into cardboard boxes and stacked them in the garage, refusing to let her presence linger in the living areas. The silence wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. I ate a steak dinner at the kitchen counter, drinking expensive scotch, finally breathing without a heavy weight on my chest. 2 weeks later, my brother Kevin called with an update I didn't ask for. Rachel was bouncing between her sister, Hannah's couch, and cheap motels. She couldn't get an apartment because she had no credit history and no job, and the settlement money was evaporating fast. She had actually asked Kevin to ask me for a deposit, claiming it was for Tyler's sake. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. She was still trying to use our son as a bargaining chip. Even after burning that bridge to ash, Tyler didn't take the financial cutoff well. Without my tuition payments, he couldn't register for the next semester. He didn't apply for loans in time, paralyzed by the belief that I would eventually cave. He dropped out of state college and moved into a cramped apartment, delivering pizzas for a chain restaurant. He sent me one email, not apologizing, but demanding I fix this, before he fell further behind. He still blamed me for the consequences of his own perjury. He was learning the hard way that integrity has a price tag. I settled into a new routine of bachelorhood. I worked late because I wanted to, not to avoid a nagging wife. I bought a motorcycle, something Rachel had forbidden for 20 years. The house became mine again, filled with the smell of sawdust from my workshop, rather than her lavender potpourri. I blocked their numbers, but the grapevine kept me informed. Rachel wore out her welcome at Hannah's house within 3 months. Her brother-in-law got tired of the drama. The walls were closing in on them, and I wasn't there to hold them up. I thought the story ended there. I thought I had successfully amputated the gangrenous limb of my family tree. But toxicity is genetic, or at least learned through osmosis. While I was rebuilding my peace, Tyler was out in the world, desperate for connection and validation. He was clinging to his mother, absorbing her twisted worldview like a sponge. I assumed silence meant they were moving on, but I was wrong. The silence was just the incubation period for the next disaster. The apple hadn't fallen far from the rotting tree. 2 years slipped by in a blur of quiet productivity. I promoted 2 junior managers and finally finished restoring the antique dresser in my workshop. Then Kevin called with news that felt like a punchline. Tyler had gotten married. The ceremony was last September. A small affair funded by loans Rachel took out in a desperate bid to appear solvent. I wasn't invited, of course. My invitation was lost in the estrangement. I felt a pang of pity for the girl, Olivia. She had no idea she was marrying a man who was already broken. I remembered meeting Olivia once before the chaos started. She was studying accounting, a sharp girl with a warm smile. She came from a family that believed in hard work. The kind of people I thought I was raising Tyler to become. Kevin told me she was the breadwinner, working long hours while Tyler drifted between entry-level jobs. They rented a nice apartment downtown, projecting an image of young success. But foundations built on debt and deception always crack eventually. It was only a matter of time before the facade collapsed. Rachel finally landed a job as a receptionist at a low-end real estate office. It wasn't much, but it gave her access to people with money, her drug of choice. Tyler started visiting her there for lunch, probably looking for handouts she couldn't give. That was where he met Michelle. She was 35, married with 2 kids, and looking for a distraction. Rachel didn't discourage the flirtation. Instead, she treated it like a fun secret, ignoring the wedding ring on her son's finger. She was lighting the fuse. The affair followed the exact script Rachel had written with Brandon years ago. Tyler and Michelle started meeting at hotels during the day. They dined at steakhouses Tyler absolutely could not afford on a driver's wage. He began draining the joint savings account he shared with Olivia, burning through their rent money to play the big man. It was a hereditary compulsion, a need to buy affection with stolen funds. He was mimicking his mother's destruction step for step, blind to the cliff edge. He felt entitled to his happiness. Secrets are slippery things, especially in the digital age. Michelle's husband, a contractor named Dave, found the text messages late one Thursday night. They weren't subtle. Tyler had been sending photos and making promises about a future he couldn't finance. Dave didn't confront Tyler violently like I had. He played it colder. He took screenshots of everything and tracked Olivia down on social media. He sent her a single zip file with a message that destroyed her world. "I thought you should know who you married." The truth arrived with a quiet ping. Olivia didn't weep or ask for counseling. She reacted with the decisiveness I wished I had shown earlier. She waited for Tyler to come home from his shift and met him at the door with 2 garbage bags. She tossed the bags onto the walkway and demanded his key. When he tried to gaslight her, using the same manipulative phrases Rachel used, she laughed in his face. She had already drained the remaining $40 from their account and canceled his phone plan. She didn't let him inside to plead his case. The neighbors watched from their balconies as the marriage dissolved on the pavement. Tyler begged, crying about mistakes and second chances, completely humiliating himself. Olivia listened for a minute, then pulled the gold band from her finger. She didn't hand it to him gently. She threw it, the metal clinking sharply against the concrete, before rolling into a storm drain. "Go live with your mother," she told him, loud enough for the complex to hear. "You deserve each other." She slammed the door. Tyler was homeless again. A week later, a message request appeared in my inbox from Olivia. I hesitated, expecting blame, but found an apology instead. She wrote that she finally understood what I had gone through. She explained that Rachel had been encouraging the affair the entire time, covering for Tyler when Olivia called looking for him. Rachel had told Olivia that Tyler was working late, while he was actually in bed with Michelle. That revelation turned my stomach. My ex-wife had actively conspired to destroy another woman's life just for the thrill. It wasn't just incompetence or selfishness. It was malice. Rachel enjoyed the chaos. She had helped her son blow up his life because misery loves company, and she was drowning in it. She wanted Tyler to be as broken as she was, so she wouldn't have to be alone. By validating his cheating, she was retrospectively validating her own. It was a twisted game played with real lives. I replied to Olivia, telling her she was blameless and wishing her well. I was just glad she escaped the fire. Peace is fragile when you have desperate relatives. Last night, the silence of my living room was broken by the harsh ring of the landline. I don't give that number out, so I knew who it was. I let it ring 4 times before picking up, steeling myself against the onslaught. "Dad." Tyler's voice was small, cracked with tears. "I messed up bad. I have nowhere to go." He sounded like the boy who scraped his knees, but I remembered the man who lied in court. Tyler's sobs were distorted by the phone line, a pathetic sound that filled my kitchen. He rambled about Olivia taking everything, leaving him with nothing but his clothes. He needed $5,000 for a retainer and first month's rent. He spoke as if I were still his ATM, ignoring the 2 years of silence between us. I leaned against the counter, watching the digital clock on the microwave tick. "Tyler." I interrupted his begging. "Are you calling to apologize for lying about me in court?" The silence on the other end was heavy with hesitation. "Dad, come on," he finally whined. "I was just trying to protect Mom. You have to understand the position I was in." It wasn't an apology. It was a justification. He still believed that lying under oath was a noble act of defense rather than a crime. My sympathy evaporated. He hadn't learned a single thing about integrity. He was only sorry that his choices had finally stopped paying dividends. "That is not an answer," I said. The line clicked, and suddenly Rachel's voice pierced my ear. She was listening on the line, coaching him. "Larry, don't be cruel," she said, her tone dripping with that familiar, weaponized victimhood. "We are in a crisis. If you help us now, it proves you've forgiven the past. Be the bigger person for the sake of your family." The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to finance their wreckage to prove my moral superiority. She was asking the victim to pay reparations to the thief. I actually laughed, a harsh sound that startled me. Rachel, being the bigger person doesn't mean funding your bad decisions. I told her, keeping my voice steady. You spent thousands on an affair. Tyler spent thousands on his. You both broke your own lives. I gripped the phone, feeling the cold plastic against my ear. Forgiveness isn't a check you can cash. You wanted independence from me so badly that you lied to a judge to get it. Well, now you have it completely. Larry, please, she shrieked, desperate now. We're going to lose the car. I didn't wait to hear the rest of the list. I pressed the red button, severing the connection and their hold on me. The silence that rushed back into the kitchen wasn't empty. It was rich and full. I blocked the number. Again, knowing they would find other victims to leech off eventually. It wasn't my job to save people who lit the match, and then complained about the heat. I walked into the living room and sat in my leather armchair. My house was quiet, paid off, and secure. The woman who cheated in my shower lived in a motel. The son who called me a monster was learning what it really means to struggle. I took a sip of my scotch, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. They wanted a story where I was the villain, but in the end, life wrote a better script. Karma didn't just knock, it kicked the door down.